This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I am your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. So something really interesting happened in the past week or so. As a son of Compton, California, I was excited to see that Kendrick Lamar said he was going to be headlining the Super Bowl in 2025. And obviously with the year that Dot has had, why not have that as kind of the cherry on top? You know, it's just a magical moment of somebody who's not just a fellow son of Compton, California, but also somebody who has historically been a protector of the culture, one of the great griots of our time, one of the great orators and storytellers, musical storytellers of our time, and someone whose authenticity in terms of having a Black experience in this country is unquestionable. What's not to love? I'm going to share a bit. This comes from USA Today. Kendrick Lamar is headed to the Super Bowl. The Not Like Us rapper, age 37, is set to perform the 2025 Apple Music Super Bowl halftime show. He shared the news Sunday in a YouTube video that showed Lamar on a football field in front of a giant American flag. Quote, "My name is Kendrick Lamar and I'll be performing at Super Bowl 59. Will you be pulling up? I hope so." End quote. Rock Nation, Apple Music, and the NFL confirmed the news in a news release, and the NFL shared a promotional poster on X that showed Lamar sitting on a football field. Quote, "Rap music is still the most impactful genre to date," Lamar said in a statement on Sunday. He goes on to say, "And I'll be there to remind the world why they got the right one." Now, as always, I'm joined by Q Ward. We are fresh off of a trip to Detroit.
Motown.
Talk to me.
It's off the Heezy for Sheezy.
That way.
It's off the Hizzle for Shizzle, Motown.
And, you know, I was surrounded by a lot of people in Q's hometown. You know, Mo Money Mo, they love some football, right? And a lot of conversations were started when the announcement was initially made. And we heard rumblings initially, and then the formal announcement was made. And Q started explaining some things to me about, you know, the Super Bowl. One of the things you said to me that was, it changed my perspective on a lot of things, but you told me that the Super Bowl is a TV show. Wow. This whole time I'm thinking it's a sporting event, which it is, but the thrust, the push is a TV show. And in consuming it that way, you understand that there are a lot of factors that go into it beyond the best team from this division or conference or whatever playing the best team from the opposing conference for a trophy and some rings. And a lot of the kind of background chatter started to make a little bit more sense. So do us a favor, Q, talk to us a little bit about some of the background chatter that kind of inspired the conversation we're having today.
Well, first of all, what a year for Compton, California. What a year for Kendrick Lamar. Shout outs to K-Dot. Shout out to Dave Free. Shout out to PG Lane. One of the things that has kind of taken over social media, and this is why sometimes it's better to wait before you jump off the porch with a take or an opinion or establish a position really fast, because there's always more information to come out. It's not just the initial press release. You don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So it's really discouraging that so many of our OGs in the hip hop space immediately took a negative position. What should have been a celebration for hip hop. You know, this is the 59th Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
There has never been a single hip hop artist headliner. Ever. So someone from our culture getting the solo headline for the Super Bowl halftime show should have been a moment for the entire culture and for the entire industry to stand up. You look like you want to say something.
Well, I was thinking the Dr. Dre one. What's different between the Dr. Dre one?
So Kendrick Lamar
solo
is the NFL Super Bowl halftime show. Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Mary J. Blige and Eminem and 50 Cent and Kendrick Lamar were the halftime show 2 years ago.
Okay, that's what I was. Okay,
so it's like they had to give us a hip hop all-star team for it to be worthy of that stage.
Okay,
that
so
they are allowing
the
Kendrick Lamar to man himself.
Got it. Okay.
Now, what they do as a production, right? The creative direction can be him with whoever I guess he sees fit, and whoever they approve to join him on that stage. But the headline, the marquee, says Kendrick Lamar. So that's who's selling the tickets. That's who the people coming to see. That's who the sponsors are paying to be associated with for this television show. And that is important to point out because the game is happening in the host city, but that is very much a production for television, most specifically the halftime show. The game isn't happening anymore. Advertisers are paying big money to be on when the most people are watching, right? The revolution or this version of the Super Bowl halftime show happens because once upon a time, the NFL lost a considerable share of their viewership at halftime.
Because of In Living Color.
Because of a TV show on Fox at the time, executive produced by Keenan Ivory Wayans, called In Living Color. In response to that, Michael Jackson was the Super Bowl halftime show the next year to ensure that that never happened again. And in every year since, the biggest names in popular music have headlined that show. Because just like when you attend an event, if everybody leaves out at halftime, when the game starts back initially, everybody isn't back in their seat yet. Same in real life. If there's nothing going on at halftime, people will change the channel. Some won't change back. People will leave the TV. People will go eat. People will do whatever. So to ensure they didn't lose that audience, which, as you know, because we work in broadcasting, would greatly affect the amount of money they could get from advertisers, they needed to keep people tuned in. So in the last 30 Super Bowls, from Michael Jackson to now, there has never been a solo hip hop artist to headline that stage at halftime during the most watched television program in the United States and one of the most watched television programs in the world, the Super Bowl. And only once in the history of Super Bowl halftime shows has an artist been on a stage that was in his or her hometown. And that was the previously mentioned Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, if you consider Long Beach a part of the greater Los Angeles area. Of course. Right? So, and even then they brought out, Kendrick from Compton, of course, but Mary J. Blige and 50 Cent and Eminem from the Midwest and the East Coast. And I think that gave people this false sense of it's going to be a hometown artist moving forward. But last year was in Las Vegas. So the headliner was Usher Raymond, who's from Atlanta. So
how about this? The major gripe that you've seen, and you've told this to me, is that people online are taking issue with the fact that Kendrick is headlining in New Orleans instead of a New Orleans artist like Lil Wayne, a Master P, a Boosie, or any of those folks, right?
That is an issue that people have taken, but kind of conveniently.
Okay.
It's like they're taking that position as opposition to Kendrick. Because why would the expectation be that a New Orleans artist would be on the stage when, with the exception of once in 30 years, has that ever happened? Eminem wasn't on the stage in Detroit. Eminem, one of the most successful, most skilled, most commercially recognizable artists in the history of music of any genre, was not on stage in Detroit. Jay-Z, the person who is now associated with helping produce this show, was not on stage when it was in New York. And we can go on and on. We can name every city. Beyonce wasn't on the stage when it was in Houston, etc. You know what I mean? So it seems like selective outrage, right? Coming from people who feel like legends like Lil Wayne, the Hot Boys, No Limit, Cash Money should be featured. And I'd like to say in response to that, first of all, I don't know how it'll play out now, since people have planted these very, very strong flags, knowing no information, right? We don't know who Kendrick planned on having on stage with him at this show. We don't know what conversations are happening in the background. People were so ready to be upset. And, I've seen some people suggest it's because Kendrick so dominantly won this battle this past year that there are those who want to pile on and want to have their issue with California and the West Coast with regards to hip hop. I don't know that that's true, but I do find it kind of ironic and kind of interesting that so many people seem so out loud upset and are kind of deciding that they're bothered by something that might not even be the case. It's like people were ready to be upset because it doesn't make any sense that hip hop in its entirety didn't celebrate that finally they're viewing a hip hop artist like they once viewed Michael Jackson
or Madonna or
Beyonce or Bruno Mars or The Weeknd,
Bruce Springsteen,
or the Rolling Stones. All of these people that have stood in that spot before, Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake. When we showed up, it was always
as a support
for someone else, or even as a support for each other with the all-star team that they used in Los Angeles. But for them to take a singular name and that artist be from our culture, we should have collectively celebrated. Instead, we were very, very ready, some of us, to have a problem with it.
So I think that it bears revisiting because, when you mention that the Super Bowl is a TV show, to me that means everything should be optimized for a TV viewing audience, not a movie consumer, not a podcast, user base, not a, nothing other than a TV audience, right? And the Super Bowl moves around every year, right? It goes to different cities. It doesn't. Yeah. It's not in the same city every year.
Different city
right?
every year.
So, to me, it feels like if it moves around two cities, that's good for the city, for the local economy. But if it's optimized for a television audience that is nationwide or globally, I'm sure there are people globally that watch the Super Bowl too. I know that Canadians get a kick out of the Super Bowl too, which is wild. That prioritizing the television viewing audience makes the most sense. And if your intention is to get the biggest viewing audience, and you look at the numbers, and again, your priority is not necessarily to highlight this city, you're producing a TV show, you're producing a football game, you know what I mean? You're not producing, here's why New Orleans historically is relevant, and here's why New Orleans is super cool and you should come visit. Although I agree with all those statements because I love New Orleans. It's like one of my favorite places in the world. Their position is, let's put on the best TV show that will reach the widest audience. So I'm coming into this conversation bringing with me the fact that we watched the Pop Out concert in LA when Kendrick popped out, in a manner of speaking. And he had not only these like amazing cultural moments in 2024, but also had this huge viewing audience, and everyone was interested in seeing what was going on there. And if the point of this TV show, specifically the halftime show, is to keep people engaged, keep the mystique and the allure, I should say, of the Super Bowl halftime show relevant for next year and years to come, and to deliver the audience to the advertisers, it sounds more like a coincidence that it happens to be in New Orleans. They were going to do the Kendrick thing anyway, right? So that's what it sounds like to me. You know better, of course. You famously are more involved and engaged with sports, rather. I know you want to say something right here, but I'm going to give you one last talking point. You mentioned people don't have all the information when they jump off their social media accounts with some wild opinions on who got snubbed and who should have been given a look, and this, that, and the third. Which, by the way, we love Wayne. We, always have. That's
icon.
Yeah, exactly.
Legend.
And if that would have worked out, nobody would have batted an eye. But it makes sense why the Kendrick thing. I'm not just, I am just a Kendrick. Like I'm biased. I'll give you that. But even if I wasn't, I see why that matters. What does go into the decision-making process, or what information should people have been seeking out before they jumped off with their opinions?
Well, first and foremost, there's a press release that just says this is who's headlining.
Okay.
But I think once upon a time, Beyonce was headlining and Bruno Mars joined her, or vice versa. Once upon a time, one artist is headlining and they bring out a special guest as a surprise for the viewers in attendance and on television. So there's just first and foremost not knowing all of the information yet. It was too soon. People were too ready to be upset.
Be mad, okay.
Secondly, a lot of people are blaming Jay-Z singularly. Jay-Z hates Lil Wayne or hates Drake and is taking that out on them and using Kendrick as a means of
that's weird because
hating on
Wayne always shows love to Jay-Z
and vice versa. They were together a couple weeks ago at the Fanatics event, and I think it was in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Somewhere on the East Coast, Fanatics had an event like a convent, like Fanatics Con. I don't know if that's what it's called, but essentially that's what it was.
Okay.
And they were together, and famously, once upon a time, Wayne had some trouble with the IRS.
And Jay helped him,
to the tune of about $14 million.
Yeah.
And Wayne, this is not speculative, Wayne has said on a microphone with a camera pointed at him that man helped me with my taxes, y'all.
Yeah.
And I love him. And I don't hate on nobody that I would give $14 million to personally. And it's Jay-Z is kind of the spearhead here, but it's not a singular decision. The NFL has its people. Rock Nation has their people. There's a creative director for the show. And then the last decision, the last word, the final call is made by the host city. But I'm sure you won't see anybody on here mad at the city of New Orleans that Lil Wayne isn't headlining the Super Bowl.
They're just mad at Jay-Z.
They're mad at Jay-Z, I think, selectively, and mad at Kendrick selectively.
Why would they be? Okay, before we get to why they would be mad at Kendrick, I want to make sure that I flesh out a connection I just made.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying that Jay-Z might have been mad at Drake, right? It's not just Lil Wayne, but they're saying he might have been mad at Drake too, right?
Drake and or Lil Wayne.
Okay. But if Drake is a part of this conversation, Jay-Z is mad at Drake. Him, quote unquote, snubbing Lil Wayne in New Orleans doesn't feel like the best way to get back at Drake.
It doesn't feel that way at all.
So people making that connection, that feels crazy. Jay-Z snubbing Lil Wayne, if him and Lil Wayne really had a problem with each other, I know they've had some stuff in the past. I suspect that was more Birdman, but in recent years they've been fine.
Again, they were together 2 weeks ago.
Exactly my point. So that also feels a little crazy.
Let me paint the picture a little more clearly.
Yep.
The city of New Orleans has about 400,000 people.
That's smaller than I thought.
All of them won't be attending and or tuned into the Super Bowl.
Okay.
But even if all of them went, the venue won't hold 500,000 people. Mm-hmm. Right. So say all of them are watching collectively on TVs or viewing parties or whatever. Mm-hmm. The stadium, the Superdome in New Orleans, holds a little bit more than 80,000 people. Mm-hmm. 120 million people watch the Super Bowl on television.
That's different.
That's the audience. The Super Bowl host committee will make sure that the on-the-ground experience is great for the city. Mm-hmm. And the city will make billions of dollars in revenue from tourism and just everything that the Super Bowl brings with it. But the product that has the cameras pointed at it, the game, and the halftime show is for the 120 million people that don't live in that city. And if they decided that it's hip hop's turn to have the main stage and the marquee and the headline, then the most commercially viable artists would make the most sense. Mm-hmm. And I'd say the guy who's been in the top
running it all year,
for the last several months, the most streams in this amount of time in the history of streaming, would be the choice that you would make. And people are somehow conveniently throwing that logic out so that they can have a problem. And
so
I
they can
suggest
be mad,
that it's people who already don't like Jay-Z. We've heard Cameron voice his opinion on it. We've heard Nicki. We've heard now Birdman. And then people who are from New Orleans who, because of what happened with Dr. Dre, made up their mind that when it comes to our city, we're going to have a similar moment. Mm-hmm. But they just haven't been paying attention to history if that's how they felt.
I want to add something there. Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Dr. Dre obviously is probably one of the biggest musical acts, period. But Snoop Dogg, and this is not a skills thing. This is not a who can beat who's the best battle rap. This isn't that. In terms of the most famous name associated with hip hop, which in a lot of people's minds who aren't like a part of the culture, they're just a part of the larger, human family. The name that rises to the top of their minds most frequently is Snoop Dogg's. And so in a lot of people's mind, that just makes him the best rapper of all time. That's it. When you think of rap, you think of Snoop Dogg. So Snoop Dogg plus Dr. Dre means that, you can have a fantastic halftime show. And I'm not going to argue that Wayne wouldn't have a fantastic halftime show, or P, or, anyone else on the ground in New Orleans. But I think that when you take into account that Snoop Dogg is going to be higher up on a list than Lil Wayne, 9 times out of 10, because not everybody is a fan of hip hop that knows the difference between different artists.
When you say 9 times out of 10, kind of as a benefit of the doubt, if we're talking about metrics,
yeah,
recognizable brands.
There you go.
Like there's McDonald's, Apple, Snoop. Like Snoop Dogg has he's now a brand. He's transcended his career as a hip hop artist.
Yeah, there you go.
So Snoop Dogg is almost as recognizable as these other brand names,
right,
by people who've never listened to
any of his music.
But
they know, and they'll say, without having heard a single song of his, he's the best rapper of all time. He's the great, and if you did a survey of whatever, they would write his name in the most because it's the most recognizable.
Yeah.
So I could see that coming together by itself. And again, that's not an argument against Wayne or anyone in New Orleans. That's an argument for what happened 2 years ago in Los Angeles. But I think one of the things that I think we're able to do at this point is get an idea of how Jay-Z feels about it. So this comes from Vibe. Jay-Z has explained his reasoning behind selecting Kendrick Lamar as the headlining performer at the Apple Music Super Bowl 2025 halftime show, announced on September 8th. The hip-hop icon and NFL music strategist released a statement coinciding with the news of Lamar being tapped to take the stage during the halftime show, which will take place during Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, Louisiana in February 2025. Quote, Kendrick Lamar is truly a once-in-a-generation artist and performer, end quote, Jay-Z said of the 17-time Grammy Award winner. He goes on to say, quote, his deep love for hip-hop and culture informs his artistic vision. He has an unparalleled ability to define and influence culture globally. Kendrick's work transcends music, and his impact will be felt for years to come, unquote. So that is straight from Jay-Z himself, for those that have been taking issue with Jay-Z. Not that Jay-Z was the only decider. Again, as you mentioned, ultimately the last decider is the city. Yeah, I think that's how you said it, right?
Yeah, the host city is the deciding vote.
Okay.
They're presented with the list, and we have to also recognize that Wayne might not have been one of the artists considered for them to snub. It's not like we pick Kendrick over Lil Wayne.
Yeah.
Again, icon and legend, but at present, Wayne isn't active in the releasing of new music.
In the way that Kendrick is.
Yeah, Kendrick is as active as possible, placed as prominently as possible. Like I think it's a timing thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Kendrick is in the middle of like a supernova moment.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is commercial viability here.
For a TV show.
For a television program that over 100 million people will watch.
I'm going to add something else there. The timing thing, I think that makes a lot of sense to hear you say it out loud, because we were recently on the ground in New Orleans, and we're going to be back soon. Again, one of, I think, our favorite places. I love that place so much. New Orleans does, in fact, show love to New Orleans. It's special. You know what I mean? We were fortunate enough to get some time with Mark Morial, who is the man down there, and he's the president of the National Urban League,
formerly the mayor of the city of New Orleans.
Right. And he's still moving around. He's still active. He is not like super aged or anything like that. He is out on the streets having fun, doing his thing. And
he put us in the company of some legends while we were down there.
Exactly. So he's a little older than us, but he's not old. He's not an old man. He's, and I think it might be the convention center there.
It's named after him?
Is named after him.
Yes, sir.
So imagine that. He's alive right now. He didn't pass away and then, they named it after him after, he passed away, and they're trying to, nope, he's there right now on the ground. Drives by it every day, sees his name on the, you know what I'm saying? In terms of murals and how the city shows love, there's murals of Boosie, there's murals of Wayne. Of course, these people know their contributions, and it's New Orleans. The musical history in New Orleans is everywhere. Like if you go to my social media right now, I'm taking pictures in front of like jazz legends, spray painted on the side of buildings and musical instruments and so forth. Fantastic place. And New Orleans knows that, and they own it, and they love it, and they love their artists, and they love their history, not just hip hop, but like jazz and all that sort of stuff. So you're right. It might be a timing issue more than New Orleans even failing to show love to Lil Wayne.
I don't think it was a Kendrick Lamar versus Lil Wayne thing.
Right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Case. I think these people are planning out a television show. The game has to take place in a city, but the competition happening in that city is a very, 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 very small percentage of the audience that program is being made for. Mm-hmm. So it's not the game in and of itself. It's not a tribute to New Orleans. It's very likely that neither of the teams playing in the game will be the New Orleans Saints.
That's what I was going to say too, because normally that's not how it works.
Yeah, so that the production and the program that we're watching on TV has very little to do with the city, which is evidenced by the last 30 Super Bowls, or the last 31. Only one in the last 31 had an artist represented from the city where the game was being played.
Yeah, where it's played, yeah. Also, something else weird I found out. I think I remember this correctly, but they were playing a football game in like Brazil or something crazy, like a different country.
Yes.
So there's no real I think when you said host committee or something, so that the game on the ground can they can maximize the benefit to the city and the local economy.
Yeah, so there's plenty of things that go into that part, right? The suppliers, the sourcing, the partners, who gets to participate in commerce. There's a host committee assembled so that the city hosting the game can benefit the most that it possibly can. So there's a commercial aspect to it. Without, like I said, there'll be over $1 billion in revenue for the city of New Orleans. That's how the league gives back to the host city, right? And they take that windfall of money around the country every year. They don't come to celebrate that city. Let's do a New Orleans fest. No, we're going to play our football game in you guys' building. We're going to make sure you guys make a lot of money from it. But we are filming and shooting a live TV show.
Okay.
And 0.001% of our audience will be here.
Well, I think that that point is further made by the fact that, the Super Bowl, or not the Super Bowl, but football games, they can play them not just in different cities, but they'll take, because historically, this is my understanding, professional football games, they will play in one of the two teams' stadiums, right?
Yeah, during the regular season, yes.
Right. But recently, I was made aware of, I don't remember exactly how, but I was made aware of two American football teams playing a game in like Brazil or something.
Or
crazy.
London.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that means neither one of these teams is based here because it's American football. They don't even have football teams in Brazil or London, as far as I know.
On a professional level, no.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to say. So even in those circumstances, it feels like the decision-making process is very similar to the decision-making process going into the Super Bowl. So for everyone online who has given in to their most negative tendencies, that the desire to be adversarial, the desire to criticize and pick apart whatever, instead of looking at what is the positive here, instead they focus on the negative. For all those people, I feel like taking a step back, looking at the NFL for what it is. It can be good, it can be bad. I suspect that it's probably more bad than good, just because of the things that I hear in the spaces that I'm in, that the NFL has a lot of problems. But it does bring a lot of joy to a lot of people. I'm not one of them. So I hyper-focus on, well, I don't hyper-focus on any problems, but I see the problem. They're more visible to a person like me. And that's, I just want to be clear. I'm not mad at football game. Like, I would go and hang out and have a good time just because of the fellowship, but I'm just not I wouldn't watch a game by myself. It doesn't do anything for me. I would play it, with other people, but anyway, I think that taking all of that into consideration, the fact that the NFL does this, that they move this television show for all intents and purposes around, and even when it's not a big television show like the Super Bowl, they have other television shows that they do from other countries where they don't even have a football. They'll take both football teams to a different place and produce something there. The fact that they have a way to benefit the local economy, the fact that they involve the local decision makers, like in this case the city of New Orleans, in putting together the entertainment aspect of the Super Bowl halftime show, and everything else. This is the information a lot of people are missing. I think that a lot of people can kind of ease off the gas when being critical of Kendrick performing in New Orleans, because really, I think you said it best. Kendrick is just performing in 2025. I think that's just the best way to say it. Now, this is a democracy, not a dictatorship. Q and I are not your overlords. And you are free to disagree. And if you want to do so, you can do it using the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app, or you can hit me on all social media. I am at Ramses Ja.
I am Q Ward on all socials as well.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so don't be afraid to share them. All right. And until we hear from you,
peace.
This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the red microphone talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja, on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.